Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having us here today. My name's Ed. I'm with the Mutant Cats DAO, and we're here to talk to you today about the intersection of DAOs and NFTs. I'll go ahead and let everyone introduce themselves. Why don't we start with Kevin?
Sure. Hey, my name is Kevin Seagraves. I'm the CEO at Nifty Apes. We have a seller financing SDK for NFT marketplaces. So what that means is a buy now, pay later experience in secondary markets. But that also means mint financing, artist 101 financing, and short-term increased buying power for traders.
Hey everyone, my name's Agash. I go by Agash.Argo. I build on the Algorand blockchain. I'm currently the CTO of two businesses which we're kind of in the process of merging together. One which is an NFT marketplace and one which is a DAO builder, and we're kind of looking at the intersections between both. We originally started with the DAO builder before we bought the NFT marketplace, and now we're trying to bring it kind of all under one banner called RAND.
Hello, and I'm Svet, and I am also with the Mutant Cats DAO. I'm on the board, and I run the treasury of the DAO.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So why don't we start with Agash here? Maybe, Agash, you could tell us a little bit about why should an NFT project look into becoming a DAO? Maybe you can talk a little bit about your DAO Builder project.
Yeah, sure. I think it does a lot relate to kind of what the NFT project itself wants to do, and I think there's a few examples that we've seen kind of happen with the Algorand ecosystem. One which is kind of the NFT project wants to invest in other things. So let's say whether that's buy other NFTs, other tokens, or get involved in some other way, shape, or form. And those which I would probably class them as setting up like kind of like sub-investment DAOs where, you know, members of the community can kind of come together. And, you know, we kind of did something on Algorand where one of the NFT projects went and bought Bored Ape, and it was just kind of a few collectors kind of banded together to do that. The other, which is kind of like, I think probably much more similar to the Mutant Cats DAO, is like when the DAO itself is kind of running the NFT project. Mm-hmm. And the third, which I've seen in the Algorand ecosystem, is more of kind of like a sidecar community DAO where, you know, let's just say the project gets X number of royalties. They give 10-20% of royalties straight to this community DAO, and anyone in the community can propose, you know, I want to host an event, I want to host a NFT.NYC side event, or I think we need this tooling for our project, or etc, and kind of lets the community control a much kind of smaller subset of kind of the funds for the NFT project.
That's super interesting. And when you're building for these platforms for DAOs, are you seeing that one type of DAO is more popular than others, or are you kind of finding it's pretty much spread across evenly?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we have being a DAO builder is every single DAO that we work with wants to do something completely different, which has a lot of technical challenges. Some have regulatory issues where they want to buy, I don't know, off-chain assets, so we underpin them with LLCs. Some just want to, you know, trade NFTs on loads of different chains, and the custodial solution and the treasury management solution of that is also fairly complicated. So I would say it's, yeah, everybody wants to do their own complete thing, and it's kind of hard to build a kind of one-size-fits-all solution for everyone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for those of you, and for the, you know, anyone watching on the video here, who maybe we're making a huge assumption that everyone understands what a DAO is, right? So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. It's essentially a decentralized company or organization that can function in a similar way to what a traditional company or corporation could function in, and even more than that if you expand it in other interesting ways. But one of the main challenges a lot of times that DAOs tend to face is how do you govern these decentralized, thank you, how do you govern these decentralized organizations, right? And so maybe, Svet, you could talk a little bit about how us at Mutant Cats use NFTs to help govern our DAO.
Sure. So our 10,000 collection of mutant cats are basically representing the governance token of the DAO that controls the treasury of that belongs to the DAO. So every financial or strategic decision that the DAO makes goes through a vote, and it's a vote by the community. It's a simple majority, and for an approval. So the idea is that the delegation of the authority goes really down to each individual holder. for example, we use Snapshot as our on-chain voting system, which records every vote, and it's token gated. So as long as you have mutant cats in your wallet, you're able to vote on all of those decisions. Now, how do we get to a vote is also a very tedious process. Each member of our community is able to bring up a proposal through on our social channels like Discord and so on. But we go through a rigorous process of evaluating those proposals before they actually materialize to a vote, because we don't want just people throwing spaghetti at the wall. And the two major things that we look to accomplish with each vote is, one, to have a broad engagement by the community, either for or against the specific proposal, and second is that the proposal has to align with the long-term goals of the DAO that we have established. I'm not going to take a lot more time, but just to answer your question about you know, why we think DAOs are better structures than corporate structures is that again, by owning the tokens for each individual holder, we believe that it has that the community has a much tighter control over the governance, rather than if you compare it to a typical corporation. Yes, you can compare it to a shareholder vote, but nowadays most shareholders vote through a proxy, through a big asset management company makes those decisions, and not the individual owners of the stocks. So given the limited amount of 10,000 and the wide ownership, widespread of the ownership of those tokens, we believe is a better governance process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it really makes each individual NFT feel more valuable to an individual holder, as opposed to just owning one stock out of a billion, and and
correct.
not getting that kind
And
of
we also don't have profit motive in that.
Exactly. So, but what's interesting about that, right, is us as a collector DAO are always kind of interested in looking into ways that we can leverage our NFTs and also the NFTs that we own and collect, because we have a huge treasury with a lot of very valuable NFTs that the DAO holds in its treasury. So I think that'd be a great question for Kevin. Kevin, how could maybe something like what you guys are doing at Nifty Apes be? How could you target something like that towards a DAO like us, for example?
Yeah, sure. So there's three kind of main use cases for a DAO to interact with Nifty Apes. One, if you're a collector DAO, trying to acquire more NFTs, being able to purchase with financing allows you to gain more exposure to these assets with the same amount of capital up front, right? So you're making payments over time, you're paying some amount of interest along with those installment payments. But if I really want to gain exposure because I think this may be more valuable, or there's some value to be gained by having some access, I can do so more effectively. The second way is if I'm trying to sell my NFTs or my assets as a DAO, right? I'm trying to maybe diversify my treasury. I can sell with financing in the same way. So I say, hey, I could list at a buy now price of, let's say, 10 ETH, right? But I can offer financing, so 6 months, 10% interest with 30% down, but I'm selling it to you for 12 ETH. Right, and so I'm realizing a 20% gain when you lock in that price, and I'm maybe charging some interest over time. So that's the buy and the sell side. And the third way is you can actually provide like third-party liquidity. So what I just described was a seller financing model. So a seller says, I will accept 20% down, 10% interest over 6 months, and a buyer can buy that thing over time. You can also include a third party that provides third-party liquidity. So now instead of the seller directly providing the financing, this third party is offering the buyer the ability to kind of be in the middle a little bit. And so the buyer says, I want to buy that asset, and this third party liquidity provider will buy that asset on the market and then sell it to them with financing. So it's still seller financing, but now someone else is kind of being in the middle. And so the Treasury has the opportunity to do that as well. So now they can say, hey, we're providing this pool of capital. If you want to buy an asset, we'll sell it to you as seller financing. But the sellers, like whoever, the individual holders of those tokens, don't actually have to list them themselves. And so that's a way for a treasury, so like for mutant cats, for example, you could say, hey, anybody who, we're just going to provide financing, buy now, pay later financing on the mutant cat collection. Anybody who wants to buy one can, and we're going to provide that financing. Yeah, so those are the three ways. We can talk about risk models and like why people want to do this, how you can make more money, how sellers are significantly hedged on the downside, those kinds of things if you'd like to.
Nice, and I'm assuming that if people were like look up Nifty Apes, they can get a lot of this information online. Or do you guys have anything?
Yeah, so it's niftyapes.money is our website.
Okay, cool.
We're live on mainnet and in production at marketplace.niftyapes.money. We're productizing our SDK currently and doing an integration with a number of high-profile marketplaces that you'll see come online in the next month or so.
Didn't you mention you guys are just rolling out another DAO too?
So we're doing an integration with the Super Rare DAO.
Oh, nice.
So they should be coming out in a month and a half, depends on
awesome.
marketing. There's a couple other lined up along the way.
Awesome. What about you, Agash? Like, what do you think about the idea of DAOs buying NFTs and you know, even using them in leverage situations and different types of scenarios?
Yeah, I think that's inevitably where we're going to head, because I think, as you kind of were describing DAOs as entities, entities do make investments, buy things, and all these things. And I think usually when you do buy things in the real world, you usually lease them or you do financing, or that's kind of how things work in the real world. And obviously, I think, you know, there are going to be a bunch of different advantages to doing that. And I think with certain NFTs, especially on chains like Ethereum and Solana, like the prices are extremely high for the average day individual to, like, you know, go buy a typical NFT with gas fees and everything involved. So I think financing is very important. I think for a DAO as well, like financing gives them a lot more of a better run rate of, like, you know, how much money have we spent, how much interest are we going to pay, and it gives them, like, you know, they can start doing things like forecasting, which a traditional business also does.
Do you see DAOs becoming more of like an emergent trend in the NFT space as time goes on? I mean, right now we have some fairly reasonable size NFT DAOs out there. I mean, ours is probably on the smaller side compared to like Flamingo or something like that, right? But do you see maybe smaller NFT projects or even more PFP projects or even gaming projects in the future possibly going into the DAO model?
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing which we are obviously also working on is, I think we will see a lot more of that after we get better infrastructure in place and better guidance on what DAOs can and can't do. Obviously, the whole regulatory angle of it is still a massive gray area, and, you know, in the US it's even worse. We obviously primarily operate all of our DAOs offshore out of the Cayman, because regulatory-wise and all the legal jargon that my lawyers tell me I can't do in the US. But yeah, I think as we gain more clarity, instead of like a gray area, and we get more tooling, more infrastructure to support kind of all these different initiatives, and more SDKs which can integrate into DAOs and integrate into, you know, things like Gnosis Safe and all these tools that are already used. But I think the issue that we have now is how DAOs typically operate is they use a disparate set of tools which are kind of everywhere. Like you guys use Snapshot for voting, probably use something else for your
Discord
treasury,
for communication,
Discord for communication,
Gnosis for
yeah,
treasury,
exactly.
yeah.
And like all of that stuff kind of needs to start talking to each other and coming together. But right now, they don't communicate. You kind of repeat the information or repeat the steps on kind of multiple platforms. I think integrations, SDKs, kind of all that stuff is kind of needs to come first as part of the infrastructure piece.
And maybe I should ask you a question as well, because you've been doing all the
Go ahead.
but also for Agash. I think you hit the nail on the head by, you know, saying that I think what one of the biggest challenges with DAOs is really how do you interact with the Web 2 world, and you know, how do you structure legally to be able to receive fiat payments or make or get into actual contracts. Do you want to talk about some of the challenges?
Yeah, of course. And it is a huge challenge, right? Because as a DAO, we don't really have a legal identity, and there are some states, at least in the United States, there are some states that are trying to pass laws to help make this happen. We were kind of early to the game, and we had to kind of jump a lot of hoops. We had to talk to a lot of different lawyers, and actually ended up incorporating our DAO in British Virgin Islands, to give us some kind of sense of identity, so we could actually sign a contract. Our DAO is looking into creating IP and doing some other things, and to do that, you need to sign an agreement with an artist, for example, or you need to sign an agreement with a publisher, or whatever it might be. And I remember the first agreement we ever signed was with our lawyer, who helped us create the BVI, and we signed it with the Mutant Cats logo because we didn't know what else to sign it with. We had no idea. We're like, there was no precedent, right? This has been a really kind of interesting and enlightening kind of process that we go through to try to figure out, okay, how do we take this kind of ethereal thing that floats in the blockchain cyberspace world and bring it to the real world, where we can start interacting with real companies, and take loans or make payments on something, or whatever that might be. So I don't know if that's something you guys have come across, any kind of legal challenges or anything that you guys have come across while you're building that would maybe help put some structure to some of that?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge that we have when we set up some of these corporations as DAOs, even in the US with, I think in Wyoming, they have the DAO LLC structure and things like that. The biggest problem which you have is a secondary step of actually getting service providers, which means banks, accountants, kind of all these people that actually will work with DAOs. For us, when we originally started kind of working in the US as a service provider for DAOs, it was we basically still don't really have a proper bank account. We operate the bank account offshore as well, because no bank that we would trust would give us a bank account, because it's a whole scary place, and this is not even for a DAO, it's for the company that builds DAOs. So it's like, even if you're not, as a DAO, it's like 100 times harder, but even just being a service provider in the crypto Web3 DAO space is
banking is a huge challenge, right?
It's a big challenge.
Yeah. So maybe, Kevin, I don't know, is Nifty Apes do you guys offer any kind of DAO treasury management? Do you guys have any kind of solutions for DAO treasury management?
Yeah, we don't have any direct solutions productized. I mean, so there's a product called DAO bonds, right? And so a DAO can take, if you're holding ERC20 tokens, you can wrap those tokens into an NFT, and then you can borrow against those tokens, right? And so it's essentially taking your native token and borrowing against it, and extending your runway generally. So typically DAOs have a lot of these, and then but they don't want to sell them, right? And kind of taking the price on the market. So they would rather borrow against it, getting a stable coin, and then spending that. And so that's available on Gnosis Chain. We partnered with Hedgie to create that product. DAOs really want it, but it's hard to find a lender on the other side, right? Like, oh, okay, little DAO XYZ wants to get a bond. That's great, but I don't want to. No lender wants to end up with a big bag of random coins.
Yeah. Oh, a question for you though. We spoke before we came on stage, and you said that everything that you do is on chain, but having actually access to Web3 financing is probably, that's a huge market. How do you see that bridge getting from somebody that actually has capital and is willing to lend but has no Web3 experience or infrastructure?
So onboarding.
Onboarding. So how does an individual user get access to that financing?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so what's great about this model of seller financing is that the counterparty risk is very low. Actually, the model is, okay, I'm selling something, you're buying, 20% down, 10% interest over 6 months. You can either continue payments. You can use that asset via delegate.cash during the loan. You can sell the underlying asset at any time as long as it pays off the loan. But if you default, I get to keep your down payment and any payments you've made, and I get to seize the asset if you default. So I can resell it, right? And so if the price goes down 40%, you made a 20% down payment, game theory would dictate that you would default. But me as the seller, I'm still only down 20%. right? Because you took the first segment of loss. So it creates a hedge system where your individual credit score doesn't matter as much. I can basically play the numbers, and I can dial up the down payment, or I can dial up the interest, whatever the upside it is for me, to mitigate my risk. So there are liquidity providers who are interested in providing capital for these kinds of loans. We just basically need to set up that infrastructure so they can do so and get the distribution. And so that's one way, mostly they're looking at top 10, top 25 NFT collections, because that's where the liquidity is and where it's a more stable value in an asset. Or it's a more values-aligned org, like Mutant Cats DAO, right? Hey, we want to provide buy now, pay later loans on Mutant Cats. If somebody defaults, we're okay holding that asset because we believe in it long term. When you can find those value alignments, it tends to make a lot more sense.
Cool, thanks.
So it looks like we're kind of running down here to our last couple minutes. So I don't know if you guys each want to just take a second, tell us, final thoughts, plug whatever you guys want to plug, tell us a little about your project, how we find out more about it.
Sure, I'll start on this side. Yeah, we're, again, as I said earlier, we're at NFTapes.money. Our public SDK will be available in about a month, we think, is about the timeline. You can check out our production, mainnet, deployed product at marketplace.niftyapes.money. You can reach me at Captain Seagraves, CAPTN, and then my last name at Twitter. And that's what I got.
Yeah, if you guys want to learn a little bit more about Rand Gallery and what we're doing, our website is randgallery.com. And on Twitter, I am also Agash if anybody wants to have a chat. And if you guys also just want to learn about Algorand, which is obviously another layer one which we build upon, happy to kind of have a chat about that anytime as well.
Awesome. And I'm Ed with the Mutant Cats DAO. Check us out at mutantverse.io. We're on Discord. We're always looking for new members. Come and join us. Help us talk about proposals and see how we can keep pushing the DAO forward.
Yeah, we have a minute and a half, so I just wanted to see if anyone has any questions from the audience. Well, seems like we did a good job then.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Appreciate you guys' time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.